Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am so excited to have this next guy on the show. He's a retired LA counter-terrorism cop with over 30 years of experience in law enforcement. He is also the author of a great book, top book, Outside the Wire. Gary Edgington is on. Welcome, brother.
Hey, man, I am so stoked to be here. I am really looking forward to this.
You know, I was looking at, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it, brother. And thank you for your service. Many years of dedicated service. Not, we're going to get into it. Not just you did some time in uniform, but you did a lot with the military, of course, counterterrorism work.
All right.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for. I was looking at your resume. I was like, Jesus Christ, man, what the hasn't this guy done? Jumping out of planes? Were you
no.
homie,
don't jump out of planes. Sorry.
Were you on the Bin Laden raid? Because no. I mean, I think you could fit that in your resume, bud.
Oh man, I hate people that do that shit, man. That just pisses me off so much. God, I hate that. You know, I don't. You know, those people that pad their resumes like that.
Yeah.
God,
but you know, it's something to be proud of too. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff in your career. It's admired, and I admire that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, what was the catalyst, brother? I always ask people who are in law enforcement or first responder field, you know, what was the reason you decided to, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to go serve. I want to be a cop. I want to, you know, serve the community. What was the catalyst behind that?
That guy, the old man there.
The old man. Yeah.
The old man, the chief. He was an E8, got out of the Coast Guard as an E8, went in 42, got out in 64, went to work for the LA County Harbor Patrol. He was 34, 35 years old, went to the Sheriff's Academy, which is, you know, it was a kick in the nuts for a young guy, let alone a 35-year-old guy. In fact, I have the letter that the Sheriff's Department wrote to his agency saying, you know, he did such a great job for a man of his age. It was very impressive. And I could only imagine, because Dad didn't PT. He didn't do any of that shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like I did before I went to the academy, and I was out running and doing all kinds of shit. He didn't do that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah. And that was really my dad's. My dad was my inspiration. I also was very interested in the military because having grown up with him around the Coast Guard, and I love ships. I love the Navy and love that kind of thing. And, you know, but my dad sat me down one day and said, son, if you want to go in the military, finish your college and go in as an officer, because the peacetime military sucks when you're enlisted. And I'm like, I didn't believe him. And I didn't, but I saluted smartly and did exactly what he said.
Absolutely.
And nixed the idea. But then when I was immersed with Big Army in Iraq, I realized the old man was fucking right.
Well, it's so funny. You mentioned, you know, your dad going in, you know, when, you know, he started off his law enforcement career as, you know, at a later period in life. And I remember I didn't join the Army, Gary, until I was 21. And I was called an old man. Yeah, they were like, "Oh, here's the old guy." What are you talking about? I'm fucking 21.
You can buy the beers.
Exactly. But you know, God bless your dad. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But God bless him, and you know, he definitely served, you know, his country as well as the community. And
sure did.
But since you said you know, about the Army, you brought up the Army. Can you? I mean, counterterrorism. You did some stuff overseas. Can you talk about how you ended up where you did? I mean, because you only spent you spent just a handful of years on the street in uniform.
Right.
How did you get into the counterterrorism thing?
Well, I was always interested. My interest in terrorism began in the 80s. I was a police officer at Beverly Hills. I was a detective, actually, and the Olympics were coming to LA, and I started studying terrorism. And that was the good old days of terrorism: Baader-Meinhof gang, Red Brigades, Red Army faction, blah, 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 FARC, all those assholes. And they were all communists, and their methodologies were different. But I started studying them and because I found it fascinating. And so then fast forward, I was working on the intelligence squad with the California Department of Justice as a special agent, and a slot opened up. And I had already been working a lot of cases with the FBI, so I already had my TS, and I'd been working public corruption cases and white collar fraud cases and things like that. Actually, it wasn't white collar fraud; it was a UC case, and so then then when the position came up at the Joint Terrorism Task Force, I put in for it and got it. And I started at the Joint Terrorism Task Force in 1999 on a domestic terrorism squad, and then stayed in that position until I got promoted into internal affairs in 2001. I still maintained a semi-liaison role. And then when the balloon went up on 9/11, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice created counterterrorism task forces throughout California that were staffed by special agents from the Department of Justice, our intelligence analysts, and members of local law enforcement and state law enforcement. And I commanded the task force that was stood up in Los Angeles, and I had everything from the San Diego, Orange County, San Diego County border all the way up to Monterey, which was a huge area. And then we had people inland in Riverside and other places. Anyway, so that's kind of how it started. And I worked in the Joint Terrorism Task Force and until 2008 when I retired, and I applied for this job to be an embedded advisor with the Army, either in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I was sent to Iraq as a mid-level manager guy. And I worked, I guarded the flagpole, which I learned what that means, and it sucks, at HHC, 10th Mountain Division. But I worked IED defeat. Climb to glory. And anyway, so that's how it all happened. And I was an embedded advisor, and my mission was to give them the benefit of my knowledge and experience, having worked complex investigations, counterterrorism stuff, and also organized crime. Because as you probably know, most of the bombers and all of those people, they're really kind of part of an organized crime network also.
Absolutely.
And funding and all that stuff has a lot of the same trademarks that is typical in organized crime here in the States or anywhere in the world. Money is the issue. And so that's what I did. And
follow the money.
Exactly. I actually, so that was what my mission was. And I stayed there. I was in country there at Camp Victory for about 5 or 6 months. And it was fascinating. It was interesting. It was bizarre, and which is in the book. It was bizarre. This book is fictional, but it was inspired by my experiences in Iraq. And there are a lot of things in the book that actually did happen to me. And I always tell people after they buy the book, I say, okay, I want you to read the book and then come back to me and ask me which of the things really did happen to me. And they usually don't get it. But there was some crazy shit. There was some crazy shit that definitely happened.
I can't imagine. And, it always amazes me. I don't obviously I'm not an expert in terrorism like you are, but I do know that it would shock people correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, how many threats are thwarted by people like you who are working in counterterrorism to this country every day. I don't think people realize the scope of it. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, you're 100% correct. And it actually...
And they should know about it.
They should.
Well, they should. I guess they should and they shouldn't.
Exactly, because that's a problem. That's the essential dilemma that is faced by intelligence services and counterterrorism and everybody else. Because if you disclose what you know, then it can be counterproductive because it might expose sources and methods.
Yeah, exactly.
On the other hand, sometimes you let them know by saying we've gotten word about a terrorist attack, even though you don't know what's going to happen or you don't have a clue, just to scare the shit out of them.
But there's a reason behind releasing that information. It's methodical.
Yes, there is.
There's a tactical reason to lead to.
Exactly. And saying that is obviously fraught with all kinds of major issues. So
Yeah,
it has to be done at the highest levels of government because, there's economic, public safety, all kinds of
absolutely.
concerns involved with that. But also terrorist attacks are thwarted by blue suits, coppers that just happen to stop the
Well,
right
you remember
car or see a car that doesn't look right and
Well, you
you
remember
know,
that case a couple, what was it? It's got to be a handful of years ago in New York City in Times Square
that's
where the
exactly
cop,
what I'm thinking about.
yeah, there you go. Guy had
A,
it. What
a
was it? What,
dud bomb.
yeah, it was a
That's right.
bomb.
Exactly.
And
And that would
it
have
was a beat
killed.
cop, wasn't it? It was
Yes,
a
I
beat
believe
cop.
it was. Yes, it was. It was a bomb that failed to detonate, and I think that the initiator worked, but then it failed to detonate. Something happened. I think might have been homemade explosive. I don't remember exactly all the details. I know it had frag in there. And it was intended to be an anti-personnel weapon to kill as many people as possible, which is the great difference between the Baader-Meinhof assholes of the 80s, the 70s and 80s, and our current foe, who their philosophy is kill them all and let God
Yeah.
sort them out. Believers and
Who
non-believers. If
cares
they're
about the
good, they'll go to
collateral
heaven.
damage? And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And if they're not good, then they're going to go to hell. So who gives a shit anyway? And the guys back in the 80s and 70s didn't want to kill a lot of civilians. They wanted to kill military cops, government people, and affect change that way. Nodes of government. They weren't targeting, people generally speaking. There are exceptions,
now,
but for the most part,
do you think, Gary? Because I know, I was I was a local level cop,
right.
municipal cop, and I know that there was times where we'd be working, with the IG or some
Hmm.
federal level
Hmm.
agency, and there was we got it was almost like they were hesitant with giving information, and I know that was a factor in 9/11 where there wasn't enough
Hmm.
information sharing down to the local level. Do you think post 9/11 that we're playing better in the sandbox as far as filtering some information down or a lot of information down to the locals?
Well, I know that prior to 9/11, it was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And even with local members of the task force, that there was not a free flow of information. It was not a collegiate environment
Because you don't want to give
whatsoever.
away all the information, obviously. I get that.
Well, but also, but if you're on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, you have to have a top secret clearance. You've
Yeah.
been vetted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you have the secret handshake, and in order to to pass inspection for to be allowed access to information, you have to satisfy two. You have to have a need to know and a right to know. The right to know is the security clearance. The need to know is a demonstrable need to know. And some things they couldn't share, probably because of protecting sources and
Yeah.
methods.
The implications. Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe. But that changed about 8 to 9 months after 9/11,
Yeah.
when the assistant director in charge in Los Angeles um, basically shuffled some supervisory special agents around and brought in people who were all well versed in task force supervision,
Yep.
and with local agencies, multi-agency task forces, and things like that. And the environment changed overnight, and it went from a dysfunctional situation to a completely collaborative environment that was really a joy to work in. And I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think I'm poking my finger at the FBI, and that's really not the case. I'm just telling what was really the situation. And I think
Yeah.
anybody who worked in that environment would say, yes, there were problems, because you had something called the wall. And the wall was that um, it was an artificial wall that was created by a lawyer in the Clinton administration named Jamie Gerlich, I believe.
Yeah.
And she said that agents working intelligence and agents working criminal cannot cross-pollinate. They cannot talk to each other. Now, anybody who has 5 minutes in police work and has spent any time in a detective bureau knows that the only way cases get solved is if people talk.
Yeah.
And they talk about their cases, and they
Yeah.
share the information. They do all of these things to ensure that, organically these cases get solved because somebody goes, oh yeah, I know who that guy
Yeah,
is. I
absolutely.
popped him 3 months ago. I know
Exactly.
exactly you're talking. Go, well, let's load up and go get his ass.
Yeah.
Okay, that was not the case. And then after that happened, everything changed. The wall was, with the Patriot Act, or in the Bush administration, they got rid of that bullshit, and then everything started changing, and it became a tremendously collaborative environment,
Yeah.
and a great place to work. And the agents were fantastic, and the people I worked with a lot of people from LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department. They were fabulous. My task force mission was to assemble target packages and hand them off to other agencies. We didn't put handcuffs on people. We were basically an intelligence collection
The intel. Yeah.
and synthesis group.
Yeah.
And we handed off target packages to LAPD and other agencies so they could go, do surveillances, kick doors in, throw people in jail, and
Yeah.
See what happens from there.
That's
That's
awesome. That's awesome. And what it used to be, Gary, I mean, I'm 54. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old, but it used to be.
I wish I was 54.
But it used to be when I was younger, it's kind of like the United States agencies, three-letter agencies knew who the threat was. Now it's like it could be anywhere from a radical group somewhere in the world to the 15-year-old kid that's hacking into a mainframe that belongs to the government, dumping stuff on the web, national secrets. What do you think some of the biggest threats out there are now? I mean, that's probably a broad question, but I mean, obviously we watch the news. Okay, this is a threat, but what do you? I mean, I guess there's just too many to name, right?
Well, obviously, I'm not playing in that environment anymore. I'm basically getting my information from the same sources that everybody else does. I would say state-sponsored actors.
Yeah.
Covert operations, people that are supported by the government of Iran, IRGC, Quds Force, etc. They represent a problem, and they're very, very dangerous. And Hezbollah, which is also a pseudo arm of the government of Iran, continues to present a problem. And of course, ISIS or ISIL, whoever, basically, ISIS, those assholes that morphed out of something else that started in Iraq. They are probably reconstituting. The Taliban, the problem is when we exited Afghanistan, not only did we cede that territory back to the bad guys, a outlaw regime that tortures and murders their own people for the most trivial things, we also emboldened the bad guys to play again. And that's the thing that scares me. That's the thing that keeps me up at night, because, as we gradually start to slide backwards, which we have been doing now for a while with our border security and, the encouragement of aggressive law enforcement, which we both know is really a key element of public safety, is aggressive, lawfully aggressive,
proactive.
Exactly. And when those elements are lacking, it provides a fertile ground for these guys to operate. And I don't think that I can't see how we could not have problems in the United States. If the balloon went up with Iran over something, let's, say for instance, because they've been playing games in the Gulf, seizing tankers and stuff like that. And if we don't do anything about it, they always escalate it because they only respect which the Israelis will tell you this. They only respect strength and resolve.
Absolutely.
And if you waffle, they will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so,
I think that's the image we have now. I mean, look, I'm not an expert like you, but and you mentioned the pullout of Afghanistan. Exactly right. Not to mention the billions of military hardware equipment that we left on the ground Who do you think is going to use that? I know you know.
Well,
I mean, it's billions of dollars that was
millions and millions of rounds of everything, small arms,
Why don't
medium.
We just armed them.
Exactly. And our people will be killed with ammunition that was made at the Lake City Arsenal in Missouri. I mean, that is a fact. That will happen one of these days. There will be soldiers, young soldiers, that will be called into service somewhere over there because the balloon has gone up, and they will be facing weapons that were surrendered. And let's face it, that's what happened. We surrendered that country to the Taliban. We all know that the Afghanis, just like the Iraqis, they're a mess. They don't have a national identity to coalesce around. And so, it's like herding cats. You just get what you can get. So we needed, even if we did a complete drawdown, we still needed to leave a presence at least
Absolutely
at the airfield. And in Kabul there, and maintain a presence there, as opposed to just getting the hell out of Dodge, throwing everything in the trunk of your car and going, racing on down the road, which is what we did.
And I agree. We need, we should have had a presence there. I mean, the Soviets were there, and they couldn't they were there for years, and they couldn't. Of course, they're not the U.S. military, but they've been fighting for thousands of years over there.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They like fighting. I think that's, I read somewhere that a man isn't a man over there unless he's carrying, a weapon, which in that case would be a Kalashnikov or one of those things. And so, I worry about that stuff a lot.
Well, I think I definitely do too. And it's just, hopefully the pendulum will switch back around, and we can start. Obviously there's politics involved, but we need to start projecting strength again, where you carry a big stick, but you can negotiate, but you're not afraid to use the stick if you have to.
The thing that concerns me, though, that it might require a catastrophic event for people to wake up again about this kind of thing. And that's the thing that scares me. Their warning signs are starting to pop up again, that attack in that schoolyard by that Syrian guy, and increase in terrorist activity in Israel, and other things that are probably going on that we're not aware of.
And China with Taiwan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then that's the whole whole state actor thing is a whole other level of concern, between, what Russia's main goal is not to take the Ukraine. It's to protect itself by building a buffer, which is recreating the buffer zone that they had prior to the collapse, which includes Poland and Hungary and Romania and the Baltic states and probably the Czech Republic too, because they're trying to protect themselves from traditional invasion routes that have been used historically. And think about that. Moving into Poland will give them a bloody nose. That's for sure. Poland is probably the best prepared military in NATO, besides maybe the French.
Well, and you mentioned Israel. Israel, you remember the 7-Day War. Israel will not hesitate.
Yes.
Israel will nuke everybody, at least in my opinion. They'll be like, all right, screw it.
It might be overly simplistic, but I feel like the prime directive for Israel, remember the old prime directive from Star Trek? I think the prime directive, the main force behind Israeli government and policy is never again.
Well,
and like you said, the prime minister during that war called up Assad, I think, whoever was in charge in Damascus, and said, we're going to turn your city into a giant salad bowl unless you pull your troops out. And he got religion, and he did, because he knew that the Israelis weren't playing.
Well, they're surrounded by people that
exactly want to kill
them for thousands of years.
Exactly. That makes you tough.
Yeah. Let's pivot a little bit, brother. Let's talk about the book, Outside the Wire.
Outside the Wire.
Looks like a good book. I read some of the reviews. I haven't read it yet.
Thank you.
But what was the catalyst behind that?
Well, actually, we were talking about mental health before we got on the air. The actual catalyst was a spat of soldier suicides on base at Victory, as well as an attempt homicide at a FOB outside in my area of control. And one of the guys that was under my chain of command assisted in that investigation, assist the Army in that investigation. And I was coming back from the chow hall after a sumptuous feast, as you can only imagine, and so the and I was thinking about what I'd heard about another suicide, and I thought, and I just started thinking, well, what if a guy like me, an old, flatfoot detective, was asked to assist in a multi-victim homicide investigation on a base like Camp Victory, or got involved in it in some fashion. And so that's sort of the story, the genesis of the story. And the story does begin with the murder of 2 individuals on base. But it morphs into a story of international terrorism, because that's what I really know. But I hasten to say I am not an expert. Anybody who tells you they're an expert in terrorism is, because it's such a complex subject. It's such a complex subject.
I can't
imagine.
I
mean, it's just like, it's.
Let's say you have a ton of knowledge.
I've read way too much about it. Way too much.
And you're an expert. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I don't know about that, but whatever. Oh, whatever.
But you mentioned PTSD, Gary.
Yeah.
And what we didn't talk about yet, and I hope it's okay if we talk about it, is you mentioned your God bless him, your dad, who was your inspiration to start serving. But you what we can talk about, if you don't mind, is your struggle with PTSD, and it kind of happened in the academy. Can you talk about that? Your academy.
Yeah, exactly. I was in the 3rd week of the Sheriff's Academy when my dad was killed. And I had worked, the way the Sheriff's Academy worked was I worked for Manhattan Beach Police Department. I was a police officer for them going through the academy, and they the Sheriff's Department would have the cadets, the police cadets, ride or work with their parent agency. If they're sheriff's deputies, they either rode or they worked in the jail. And if you're a police officer, you'd ride in a black and white with an FTO, a field training officer. And so I had done that night. And as is typical in Manhattan Beach, we dealt with several obnoxious drunks, and, got in a little tiny bit of a kerfluffle with one of them. And so my dad and I talked about that morning, and while he was having breakfast before he left for work. And we also talked about the Yule Love case, which was a police shooting in Los Angeles that was extremely contentious, because the LAPD officers were there investigating assault with a deadly weapon on a gas company employee who had turned off the gas at the location. The woman who was the resident there confronted the police officers with a 12-inch butcher knife and threw it at them, and they capped her and killed her. And so, you had comments from members of the police commission like, well, they wear bulletproof vests, why didn't they just let it fall off their vests? And really insane, stupid shit like that that just infuriates the hell out of anybody who knows anything. And of course the LA Times mischaracterized it as LAPD was there collecting a gas bill, which of course is complete horseshit.
Absolutely.
It's completely wrong. But of course, that's the media for you. And so my dad and I talked about that. And so then fast forward 3 or 4 hours later, I go to sleep because I'd work morning watch, and I get up, I'm standing in the kitchen, the phone rings, and they say, hey, your dad's been hurt, come to the hospital. So I didn't know what to expect when I got there. I just knew he was badly injured. And he rode a 3-wheel motorcycle, so I'm assuming he rolled it or got in an accident or something like that. So I get there, and an LAPD Beach Patrol officer meets me at the door of the emergency room and says, Gary, he says, your dad's been killed. Your dad's gone.
Jesus.
And he said, I don't know if it helps you at all, but your dad got one shot into him, and that was the shot that killed him. Now, God bless that officer, for saying that, because I know, he knew, and that I was, you know, in the academy or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think he was trying to help me, but that wasn't really the case. My dad did wound the guy.
Yeah.
He basically, what happened was, my dad, it was a Sunday morning in Marina Del Rey. My dad was was getting off of his motorcycle and was going to talk with a young woman who was running up to him, who I've just spoken with recently. And as he's getting off his motorcycle, this individual is approaching him armed with a buck knife, a folding hunter buck knife, which is that brass framed 3-inch bladed knife that people, you know, hunting people use all the time. And my dad gets off of, as he's getting off of his motorcycle, you know, and it's a big wide ass thing, so you can't get off of it easily, you know. You have to kind of like struggle. It's almost like an ATV, you know, where you kind of have to throw your leg out wide. So he's getting off of the thing, and he's trying to pull his weapon out at the same time. He's right-handed. He's getting off the bike on the right-hand side, so you can just see this is awkward. And as he does it, the witness that I just spoke with said that he had some trouble because it was awkward. He was trying to do this, and she said she also felt like he was hesitating a little bit. And my feeling is that he was hesitating because he's now confronted by an individual armed with a knife, and we had just talked about that, and it's been in the news everywhere. So, and I think in his mind he was thinking that. So anyway, he gets off the bike. He starts backpedaling. The guy breaks into a stride, and he's literally now like, I mean, when he's on top of the guy, or when the suspect is on him, he's like 15 feet away. So as he's getting off the bike, the guy's getting closer. Now at about 6 feet, 7 feet, something like that, he gets his gun out, and the guy leaps on him, and he gets off one shot. Now he's carrying a Model 15 Smith & Wesson 38 Special. The round impacts the suspect in the left hip, breaks into 2 pieces. One piece embeds itself in his hip, and the other piece exits out the lower abdomen. And the guy jumped on my dad. My dad was not wearing a vest. Jumped on my dad and stabbed him in the solar plexus. And then as he's falling down, and then cut his right carotid artery, and he eviscerated him. And then he took my dad's gun, and he emptied the shells out of it, and he walked through this kiddie beach area there with all these kids, and it's a Sunday afternoon, it's on September, so you know it's full of kids and mommies and all kinds of stuff, and he's covered in blood from my dad, and maybe from the wound too. And you know, he's ranting and raving, and he gets confronted by 2 LA County Sheriff's deputies who were responding to an officer needs help, officer down call. And as they confronted him, he slashed at them, and they saw he had a cop's gun in his waistband. It had the black Packmeyer grips that everybody had on their guns back then. And so they capped a round off at him and missed him. And then they went in foot pursuit of him, and one of the deputies dropped him. And took a long, careful shot and dropped him. And, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, went wrong in that regard, you know, with my father's deal. You know, back in those days, people didn't wear vests. At least they didn't. On that department, they didn't wear vests. My dad, I bought him a Bianchi break front holster, which was very popular back then. In fact, I was issued one at Manhattan Beach. And to get that gun out, you got to mean it. You got to snap it out. You can't just do this. Otherwise, the springs will pinch the barrel. And to be honest with you, his firearms training was not like what you and I would have gone through in our careers. They didn't shoot from the leather. They did point shooting at the range like you would do at a pistol range, you know, with your family. You know, here's your 34 rounds, you know, and there are the targets, you know, they flip them around, boom, 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 close, you know, that kind of thing. Which I had to do at the Sheriff's Academy too. But we also got tactical training, and I'm pretty sure my father never got that tactical training. And I know damn good and well, because I used to shoot with him. He always shot single action. So I know damn good and well he cocked that hammer as he was retreating, and the round probably went off just a little bit before he intended to go off. Now, would it have made a difference? Probably not. At that distance, we both know you're going to get cut and you may die. There's no question about it. You know, unless you put a round right, right between the horns, you get a little $1 million shot in there, you're going to get killed or cut to ribbons.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
I'm just so sorry, brother, that
Thank
happened.
you.
And your thoughts and prayers, and what's frustrating, Gary, is going back to what you were saying about, the media talking. This is the thing that pisses me off. If you've never been in a situation, if you don't have law enforcement experience, shut the hell up about, well, it's just a knife. Knives can do more damage than a firearm, as you know, because you can close the distance quick and you can get so many slashes off. So it's the friggin' media. It's these people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. We had cases like that when I was on the job. Well, why did the cop shoot him? He only had a knife. Well, shut the hell up. Do you realize what damage, what damage a knife can do? Your reaction time. By the time a cop lifts his weapon up, bam, the guy's on you.
Well, you've probably had the same training I've had. I was on the range staff for many, many years, the firearms and tactical training staff, and we did all kinds of classes for our agents and investigators and stuff like that. And one of them was you have a guy with a blue knife, 21 feet away, 20 feet away from you. Exactly. And the officer has a blue gun in his hand, and his job is to get off one shot before the guy is on him. They never can. They can never do it.
Because of adrenaline, they're freaking out. It's pumping.
Exactly.
The best shooters in the world, Gary, would be hard pressed to make that shot.
Absolutely. Especially, even with a gun in your hand, at 21 feet, you still can't do it. And for anybody to say that is just the height of ignorance,
absolutely,
almost criminal ignorance, in that regard, because it's just dumb. It's just really dumb, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that happened, brother. Condolences.
Thank you.
God bless your dad. But that led to, PTSD for you that lasted your whole life.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you, what happened was I took a week off of the academy, and I didn't really cry or mourn until about 2 or 3 days later, when we're at the funeral home picking out the casket. I looked at the casket, and I had this. I said, they're going to put my dad in a box, and I lost it there. And this sergeant from the sheriff's department, from the health and welfare section of the sheriff's department, put his arm on my shoulder and he said, Gary, you got to buck up for your mom. Your mom's here. You got to buck up. Yeah. So I did, and I kept it bottled up inside of me, and then I saw a movie called The Onion Field, and which I'm sure you may have seen too.
Yeah.
And that movie to this day just turns me into a mess. Yeah. The pipes, all of it just touches a chord in me that is just. But I'll tell you what happened was my first day back at the academy on a Monday. The instructors stop everything in the middle of a lecture on the vehicle code, and they start a movie, and it's a dramatization of the CHP Newhall shooting, where 4 CHP officers are gunned down by 2 assholes. Okay. And it's very bloody, and there's chicken guts flying everywhere and squibs going off. And I mean, it looks like it would gag Sam Peckinpah. It's really bad. Right.
Yeah.
And they turned that on. They did that to see if I would lose my shit and if I could hang, because we'd seen that movie many times before already. Yeah. It's the movie they show you to scare the shit out of you on the first day, to get you to, pack up your shit and get out.
Yeah. And
here we are, the beginning of week 4, and they stop and they show that movie. And I know I know exactly why that was.
Yeah.
And nobody ever asked me if I needed any help, any counseling, if I needed to talk to anybody from the sheriff's department, from the academy, from my agency. I mean, it was just, put on your Sam Brown,
Yeah.
and, hitch up your pants and, and so I graduated with my class and, and I was there were times when I was sort of hanging on by a thread. There were several times where I just was the emotion was just right here, and it bubbled out a couple of times, at different points in the academy, private moments where I was just, because some of these people some of the DIs actually knew my father because they'd worked a sheriff's station that patrolled that area. And so it was tough. And I never, and I dealt with several armed suspects, what we called 5150s, crazy guys armed with knives while I was in field training. For 3 months we did field training with an FTO. I handled 2 crazos armed with knives. And on the second one, it was a damn close thing where I almost had to shoot this guy. And everybody was holding their breath. How is Gary going to handle this? How is Gary going to handle this? And it all worked out okay. But, I never really realized. Yeah. And I never really realized that I had this inside of me. I knew that when I talked about it. Now, if this was a year ago, I would be not, I mean, I still hurt when I talk about it, but I think it's a good thing to talk about.
Absolutely.
Because I think there are lessons to be learned from that. But also I think that if I was talking about this a year ago, I'd be a little bit more emotional because I did get help. I did talk to a psychiatrist, not psychologist, and she gave me some tools to help me cope with it. We did some exercises, and it really, really helped a lot. But for years and years and years, I had this inside of me, and I was defensive and angry and all kinds of things, and I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
Nobody is
now.
Yeah.
And we all have our shit from working in this business that will never go away, no matter how much you do, because you've seen too much. But I'm in a much better place now than I was. I'm much more self-aware of my behavior, much better equipped to discuss this and talk about it and deal with it. And that's because I did get help. And, I've listened to guys, Delta Force guys, CAG operators and others talk about their struggles with mental health. And I'm telling you, that was like really an amazing thing to listen to this one guy, Pat McNamara, who, I'm telling you what, that guy is scary, even if he doesn't have a weapon in his hand, because that guy's built like a brick shithouse, and he was on Team House and he was talking about his struggles. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, this guy's talking about this, and he's not the only one. I've listened to guys from the SEAL teams and other places.
Absolutely.
And all those of us who have put on a uniform or a badge, we've seen some things and dealt with some shit, and we have to swallow that shit. But it doesn't go away. And
it usually manifests
down
the road with drinking or some sort of substance abuse.
That's true.
I know that was the case in me. And I mean, it's so hard. I think we're getting better, Gary. I don't know I think we're getting better in the first responder field especially with the younger people coming forward, the younger generation coming and saying, unlike you and I, who I'm assuming it was you, I mean, who live to work, they're more interested in working to live.
Yes.
Nowadays, most of them, the ones I talk to, but they're more apt to come forward and say, I'm struggling, unlike you and I, who were told to suck it up. But I think it's just a culture thing. I think some agencies are better at it and some agencies suck at it.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as the cultural thing, the cultural aspect of it. I grew up, with the stoic hero who, doesn't do anything, doesn't, I mean, they just deal with it. You know, the guys from World War II who carried all this shit with them and never talked about it. My dad never talked about what he saw. And I know he was in some bad places. So I know damn good and well he saw some crazy shit.
But that's how he was conditioned. That's how he was conditioned.
Exactly. They never talked about it. And, you know, I grew up in law enforcement in an age where I'm working with a lot of Vietnam veterans, and they didn't talk about their shit. Tons of shit that they dealt with that they didn't talk about. And also, you know, and it was also we still were dealing with the culture where it was still frowned upon. Now, I agree with, and I also think that the young people nowadays are much more comfortable with discussing mental health and mental health issues, because so many of their comrades are dealing with those things and struggling with those issues. So I think they're better at seeking that help, and they're probably more self-aware.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
and I also think the agencies on the surface also are probably better. But the thing that concerns me is, as we talked about earlier, is that in order to step forward and raise your hand and say, I need help, it's an act of trust. You're stepping off, you are stepping off a ledge, and you have to trust that there actually is a bridge, like that scene from the Indiana Jones movie where you step off the ledge, and is there a bridge or not? And I think on some agencies, there's a dramatic loss in confidence and in faith in the command.
Absolutely.
And I think that police officers have to feel like somebody has got their back, and they know the politicians don't. And sadly, in many cases, they know the DAs don't. And if the command staff doesn't have their backs, then, you know, are they going to step forward and ask for help? And I hope they do, because I know it helps from my own personal experience. We both know that. But the fact of the matter is, I think there are probably a lot of guys that are afraid to do it, because they're afraid that it will be a career ender for them.
And you're absolutely right, brother. And I tell people, I talk to a lot of people, you talk to a lot of people, and if you are, for the listener out there, and I know it's easier said than done initially, but if you're in that environment where if you want to reach out and ask for help, if people are giving you shit about that or trying to blackball you, or you're not getting the support you need, you don't need to be there.
That's right.
And I know I know what people are thinking. I got bills and all this. Okay, I get it. I understand that. But your health and welfare, your overall mental health, not just now, but down the road, is more important.
Absolutely.
And so you need to reach out.
Absolutely. And there is always another place that you can go to that might be, a friendlier environment. So you decompress and you go to a slower agency in a small town someplace, and maybe you don't get paid as much, but your quality of life increases tenfold.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are always solutions if you look for them. And that is something that I wish that somebody had come forward and said, hey, Gary, do you need anything? Of course, I probably would have said no. But if they were really good at what they did, if they were a skillful practitioner, they would know that I did.
They would have gotten it out of you.
Absolutely. They would have known exactly what to say to get it out of me. And I would have gotten the help that I needed to cope with this tragedy, it takes a lot of courage. It's not, this, Gary. I mean, it is a sign of strength to come forward and say, I need help. It's not a sign of weakness. Anybody who tells you different, don't listen to them. Absolutely. Because that is so damn true.
As a first responder, we see shit on a daily basis that the majority of the public are never going to see in their lifetime. I'm not saying that they won't go through some horrible stuff. Cops deal with it every day, 24/7. And there's only so much you can fill in that cup before it starts overflowing and it starts manifesting in ways.
Absolutely.
I don't care what the biggest badass you think you are, and maybe you are, or you're, I was in Delta, or I was in CAG, or I was a SEAL. Okay, this shit is going to affect you at some point. And you mentioned team guys. I mean, I talk to a lot of them, and they say the same thing. Look, You know, you go in trying to save the or change the world, and guess what? The world changes you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of
That's
times it's
true.
not good.
No, that is so true. And like you said, it takes a toll on families, on the
Absolutely.
health.
It's the
Uh,
collateral damage. Yeah.
it is huge amount of collateral damage. And
Yeah.
it's something that hopefully someday a lot of things have to change for the system to really improve. Um, you know, uh, you know, Law enforcement has made a lot of mistakes as a business, as a group over the years, but also there's a lack of understanding and a lack of caring
Absolutely.
from the people who are shouting. And the thing that really is so stupid about this whole thing is, you know, I mean, they're going to be well and truly screwed without the police
Oh,
and without hiring
absolutely.
quality police officers, which is harder and harder to do nowadays. They're going to be well and truly screwed because they lack the ability to defend themselves, and they don't have a police officer there responding to their call for help, or it's a slow roll because they don't want to get in trouble, or they see that car on the street that's casing the house out, and they don't want to shake them. They don't want to, because then they're afraid they're going to get accused of
Yeah.
some kind of
Yeah.
malfeasance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they roll the other way. Then the crooks get out and go do their robbery, and leave death and destruction in their wake. And that's what happens. That's the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. I mean,
you know
defunding, I mean, you saw it with these cities, and the listeners probably have too.
oh yeah.
What is happening with these defund cities? Guess what? They're having to hire cops again because they're realizing that, oh, it's not the utopia that we thought it was going to be without the cops and having counselors respond to, domestic violence calls. It doesn't
and
work like that.
and who in their right mind would go back to work for an agency like
No,
that?
nobody would.
And the problem is, you're going to have a you know your command staff, you've got this echelon of senior people who are your brain trust. These are the guys who train the youngsters, who solve the crimes in the detective bureau, who make the decisions in middle management, the lieutenants, the sergeants, who keep everything going. They're your non-coms. They're the
Yeah,
core.
absolutely.
They're the thing that keeps the ship going straight. And when all those guys are gone, and you're promoting 2 or 3 year,
You're
you know,
screwed.
you're screwed. If you're promoting 2 or 3 year police officers into sergeants positions, they don't even know what to do. You don't even know you don't know shit after 2 or 3 years
Nope.
on the job.
Nope. And
And
talk
you
about
certainly,
liability. And a lot of
oh
departments, they put themselves into that situation. Talk about the
yeah,
liability
yeah,
for the agency and the municipality.
yeah.
Now, and by the way, for the list, this is not a dig if you're like a 2 or 3 year officers. I'm just saying,
No, not at all.
to be put in a position of a supervisory role, at with that experience level, it's not fair that the agency's doing that, but agencies have put themselves in that situation.
Yes.
Because a lot of these middle management, like you said, the sergeants, the corporals, the lieutenants, the captains, they're saying, screw this shit.
I'm
Now,
done.
what are they left with? You got a guy who has 25 years experience, and the next guy below him has 2 years experience.
Exactly. And it's a brain drain. It's
Yeah,
a brain
exactly.
drain. And it is lethal. And
Yeah,
and there's no amount of training that will make up for field
absolutely.
experience. And it's
But Gary, brother, an optimist. I don't know. I
you
usually,
have to be. You have to be.
I thought I was going to get more negative, as the older I get, but I am optimistic that it will come back around. I mean, law enforcement is a pendulum, there's peaks and valleys. And I think we will come back around. It's not ever going to be perfect, but I think we will see, at least I hope and pray, a resurgence of strong leadership. And again, I'm not saying that there isn't any strong leadership in law enforcement and first responder fields. I'm just saying we need more of it.
Right.
So I hope and pray that it will change for the better in the future.
And I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of cycles. I remember the 60s and the 70s, and the ambushes of police officers, Foster and Laurie in New York, and a couple other ones, and bombings of police stations in California and other places. This is nothing new,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, it's cyclical, and it's part of the human condition. Humans seem to forget their history. You
Absolutely.
know,
And history
they
always
seem,
repeats itself.
and history always seems to turn back around. And you know, as soon as you lower your guard, that's when somebody moves in and you know, takes up the space. And that's just the human condition. That's just the
Yep.
way it is. And
Yep. Yep.
you know, we muddle on. You
We
know,
muddle on.
muddle
Gary
on.
Edgington, you are amazing, sir. I could talk to you all
Thank you.
day.
Likewise.
Where can people find your book, brother? You
Sure.
got your own website. I know. Can you just say
Yes.
it and we'll put it in the show notes?
Yes, I will read this off to you so I don't screw it up. Okay. The website is https://GaryEdgingtonAuthor.com. And my book, Outside the Wire, a novel of murder, love, and war. And it actually is. It has all three of those elements in it. Is available at online at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I've got you know, Instagram, Twitter, and all that crazy shit too. Although I don't do Twitter because it's, you know, it's just like, so you have these pencil necks on Twitter that just get so nasty and so violent, and
You
know,
just gotta you just gotta ignore them, brother.
Yeah,
You just
exactly.
don't
It's like,
engage.
yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, dude, you know, I know you're really brave because you're sitting at
Yeah, there's
you know,
trolls.
a computer screen, you know, and it's like, God, get a life. But you know, Instagram is at G Edgington Books.
Yeah.
And I've got Facebook, Gary Edgington, all that stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and you know, and it's a struggle. I don't mind telling you this. Social media is just
bit by bit, buddy. You just work on it every day.
You do. You have to chip at it.
You got to
really
chip at it.
You do. You really do.
Well,
But,
Gary, it has been a pleasure, brother. God bless
likewise.
you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you so much. Same to you, sir.
I appreciate coming on. Everything will be linked up in the show notes. Gary, I'd love to have you back on in the future, buddy. Maybe
I would love it. I had a great time.
Book.
Well, I actually am working on another one because people kept saying it's a sequel. It's a sequel. It takes place 3 years after the first one. And as I tell people, everybody that survived the first book is back in the second book for the most part.
There you go.
And,
for the listener.
Yeah.
Another one's coming.
Another one is coming. I'm well along on the first draft of the second book by popular acclaim. Awesome. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You take care.
It, brother. You too.
All right.